Good morning, this is Deepak here, and I'm happy to be back answering your questions and discussing the material in my book, You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. You're welcome to join the conversation on these forums. URL is right there, discoveringyourcosmicself.com. I have also been reading Dr. Lawrence Krauss's The Greatest Story Ever Told so far, and I've previously commented on that, and I'm revisiting The View from the Center of the Universe by Joel Premack and Nancy Premack, cosmologists. But today I want to discuss with you the philosophical idea of naive realism. So, and how science is slowly taking us beyond the notion that the observed reality of the universe by humans is the real reality. So if you go on the internet and you go on Wikipedia, etc., you will see many entries on naive realism. And here is a read from Wikipedia. Naive realism, also known as direct realism or common sense realism, is a philosophy of mind rooted in a theory of perception that claims that the senses provide us with direct awareness of the external world, direct awareness of the external world. In contrast, some forms of idealism assert that no world exists apart from mind-dependent ideas, and some forms of skepticism say we cannot trust our senses. Some forms of skepticism say that we cannot trust our senses. So I'm going to send this to my friend Michael Shermer, who's had many arguments with me over the years about the nature of reality. Okay, so naive realism is basically saying that the world exists out there, objects exist out there, independent of whether there is a perception of them or not. This is called naive realism. What's the problem with this? The problem with this is we do know that it is through our five senses that we experience what we call the objects of perception. But we do not know how those experiences occur or where they occur. This is known as the hard problem of consciousness. How does an action potential growing to your brain, and action potential is electrical information, how does an action potential going to your brain and causing electrochemical activity give us the experience of this, of my own body, of my thoughts, of sound, taste, texture, smell? How does that happen? And there is no answer to that. So naive realism is basically very difficult to justify as an argument for reality, since we cannot separate an object from the experience of an object, and we cannot basically say how that experience occurs in our awareness or where that awareness is. So then there are many other theories these days, and they are called representational realism, which is a whole kind of different theory, which says that the object out in the world causes vibrations of different types. These vibrations are picked up by the senses and turned into sense data. The sense data are then experienced as sensations and interpreted by the mind, after which the accurate mental image appears. But again, we do not know where that mental image appears. We do not know where the mental image appears. So now going back to traditional scientific method, including, the scientific method employed by some of the greatest physicists and cosmologists these days who are in the public domain, including, Joel Primack and Lawrence Krauss. If you look at their arguments, you'll see that all of their science is based on what they call empirical evidence, which basically says that unless you can measure something and observe it, you actually cannot call it real. But these very same scientists are slowly coming to the realization that the fundamental building blocks of nature, including particles, first of all, they cannot be seen with our sensory apparatus. Secondly, as we extend the range of our senses, we can see tracks of what we call subatomic particles, but by the time we experience them, they're not there. And thirdly, particles have a dual nature, both particle-like nature and wave-like nature. And as particle-like nature, they can be observed empirically, but possibility waves are sub-empirical. They cannot be observed. In fact, the more we look at reality, the closer we realize that 99.99% of it is sub-empirical, which means it cannot be observed. So now what are we to do with that? In fact, even the empirical reality that we observe is the collapse of a wave function that we cannot observe. The wave function is entirely sub-empirical. It's a mathematical entity. And the source of the wave function, or where the wave function is housed, is another imaginary mathematical space called Hilbert space, which has no location in space-time. In fact, according to many scientists whom I've questioned on Twitter, etc., including Sean Carroll, that Hilbert's space is not a space. Space emerges from it. It's a vector space which houses the wave function. So as we delve deeper and deeper and deeper, even from a physicalist point of view, we are left with the question, what is reality? And it turns out almost all of reality is sub-empirical, that it does not lend itself to observation. It does not lend itself to observation. If it does not lend itself to observation, how can it be real? And the answer seems to be the only reality that is real is invisible, is formless. The visible reality is a momentary experience of that which is real. Color, form, texture, taste, smell are not material objects, but modes of knowing in awareness. And then the interpretation of that mode of knowing is also a thought in awareness. And thought by itself is without any mass. We can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't taste it. And same thing with awareness. And yet, without these modalities of knowing and experiencing, we wouldn't know anything. So, we are slowly, science is taking us beyond naive realism to the real reality which is invisible. What is it? As we go beyond the appearance of molecules into the nature of subatomic particles, and then we go beyond those particles into wave functions, we are left with nothingness, with formlessness. And so what is the formlessness which makes the experience of form possible? And the only answer could be that it is the self, the self. And where scientists have a problem is that they do not acknowledge the self, because the self conjures up ideas about soul, invisibility, immortality, and yet without the self there would be no doing science. Who does science? What is it? What is the entity, or who is the entity that wants to know? That wants to know the nature of reality, that wants to know its own nature. The scientific method is based on theory, observation, and experimentation and verification. So who is it that wants to know all of that? And for lack of a better word, we have to use the word the self, the invisible self, the unseen seer, the unheard hearer, the untasted taster, the unsmelt smeller, the unthinkable thinker, the unimaginary imaginer. That is who you are, that thou art, tattvamasi, aham brahmasmi. You are that in which there is the knowing and the experience of all that can be known. And all that can be known is an expression of your own self. So every material object, including this book, including this body, including the whole universe, is the self experiencing itself as objects in space and time. And thoughts and feelings and emotions and imagination and images are also the self experiencing itself in a sub-empirical realm. But the self itself is non-empirical. It has no existence in space and time. Now, once we begin to understand, then we know that our science is incomplete. Our science is based only on the empirical, which is but a tiny drop in the vast ocean of the sub-empirical or non-empirical, that which cannot be seen, that which cannot be heard, that which cannot be tasted or smelled, that cannot be grasped in any way except as possible mathematical abstractions, which is where science is taking us. So physicists now will openly admit, some of them, that we cannot think of subatomic particles as entities that are to be seen and experienced, but as mathematical abstractions known and experienced in mathematical thought, mathematical imagination. So mind, body, and universe are actually the experiences of the self, which is always in the realm of possibilities, which is the immeasurable potential of all that was, all that is, all that will be, which is timeless, which is eternal, which is you. That's why when I say you are the universe, I'm not speaking metaphorically, I'm speaking literally. You take on the experience of the universe by taking on also the experience of the body and the mind. And this is a knowledge that can only come not through empirical observation but through self-reflection, by asking ourselves, who am I? What do I want? What is my true self? By understanding that the only reality that is real is formless, and you are that. I love to quote Rabindranath Tagore on this, when he says, in this playhouse of infinite forms, I caught sight of the formless. And so my life was blessed. The formless, the invisible, the ultimate reality is that which you are. It's the ground of existence. It's the ground of being. It's Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means truth, Chit. It is of the nature of knowingness and knowing, and Ananda, it is the peace that passes all understanding. So when we can see the world throughout the world as a silent witness, throughout the filter of thought, then we can see it as the light of awareness, without which there would be no experience of form or phenomenon. Going back to a very fundamental principle, every form is a phenomenon, and every phenomenon is the arising and subsiding of modified forms of awareness. A sensation is a modified form of awareness. An image is a modified form of awareness. A thought is a modified form of awareness. An emotion is a modified form of awareness, and that is our ultimate reality. The building blocks of the universe are not subatomic particles or material entities. In fact, subatomic particles and material entities at the most fundamental level do not exist. They are just modes of knowing and experience in awareness of awareness. The fundamental building blocks of the universe, or what we can call the experience of the universe, including our own body and mind, are sensations, sense experiences, images, feelings, and thoughts. Qualia, not quanta. Qualia are qualities of awareness. So I know this sounds heretical to scientists whose most important contributions thus far have been based on naive realism and then on representational realism, but slowly going into the direction of ultimate reality, which is nothing other than the self. The self, which is the self of the individual, but the self which is also the self of the universe. Aham Brahmasmi. Aham Brahmasmi. I am the universe. You are the universe. Tattvamasi. You are that, all this is that. That alone is. Tattvamasi. Satchitananda. Aham Brahmasmi. These are the little Mahavakyas, the sayings that actually gives us into a glimpse of reality. You might ask then is science of any help at all? Yes, the science is of great help in creating technologies, great help in changing our experience of the world for the better or for the worse, depending on how we use it. Science is neutral. It deals with the empirical world of that which we observe and see. It does not explain how we experience that world. Science does not explain how we experience. It only explains the regularities of experience, which are called the laws of nature, which we can manipulate to create comfort in the world. But we can also create havoc in the world. We create atomic bombs and nuclear weapons and climate change and extinction of species, and we risk our own extinction when our science is incomplete, when we do not ask the basic questions of who or what is doing science, who or what needs to know. Until we do that, our science will remain a mixed blessing. Our knowledge will remain incomplete. We need to know not only that which we observe, but who or what is doing the observing. Who or what is doing the observing. Know yourself, that is the highest truth. To know oneself is the highest intelligence, knowing that by knowing which all else is known. Okay, so I think I have spoken long enough, and I'm seeing a few questions, but it seems most of you are agreeing. Science and faith cannot walk hand in hand. Yes, they can. Science and faith can walk hand in hand because science is based on the faith of the scientific method. It's just another system of thought without acknowledging the source of thought. So they can ultimately walk hand in hand, and they should. That's the way we can ultimately create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and happier world. Okay, so most of you are today agreeing, and that's because, we're on the same frequency, and that's why we are agreeing. Ricardo says, why is love everything? Love is the experience of unity consciousness, that the being in you and the being in me are the same being that have put on different masks. Our body, mind, and our experience of the world is the mask that our being has taken. And it's a very interesting dynamic mask because it changes in every moment of experience. Your face is a mask. It tells everything about your history. Even your brain is a map. It tells everything that's happened in experience and consciousness. The body is a mask, and so is the physical universe, a mask that consciousness, the self, has taken on. Okay, I'll speak to you tomorrow. I'm actually going to be traveling soon to Carlsbad to do the Seduction of Spirit course. And in the meanwhile, please join discussions on You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self. The URL is right there, discoveringyourcosmicself.com. Thank you. Oh, Joanne Cooper says, I'll be attending the Seduction of Spirit. Well, see you there, Joanne. I'll see you there. See you all soon. If not there, then in this playground that we call virtual reality and cyberspace. As long as you remember that what we call the real reality is also a virtual playground in cosmic consciousness.